Hello, everyone. It's me. Today is January the 15th, 2019, if you can believe it. Now, tonight's program is a little different. I've invited a guest. He will go by the name Double X. Let me explain. He can't let his name be known because of problems it will cause. And I'll leave it at that. Double X, are you with me, sir?
Yes, good evening, Larry. A pleasure to join you and your listeners tonight.
Thank you. And Double X and I have worked together many, many times on Pastor Ernie Sanders' program, which, by the way, I will be on tomorrow night, which will be the 16th, correct? Double X, is that the schedule?
Correct. Wednesday the 16th, tomorrow night, Pastor Sanders, myself, Larry Nichols, and the listeners will be treating the subject matter of the William Barr nomination and other matters facing the Republic. So look forward to that. Folks can listen to that tomorrow night, Larry, at whkwradio.com, or they can go to www.kprz.com. So kprz.com or whkwradio.com, and they can tune into the broadcast at 10 p.m. Eastern for 2 hours, and of course that's 7 p.m. Pacific. And folks can call in to speak with you then, Larry, on that broadcast once the phone lines are opened up. And folks, if you're interested to do that tomorrow evening, that phone number will be 888-677-9673. That's 888-677-9673, and that's for the What's Right, What's Left radio broadcast out of Cleveland, Ohio, with Radio Pastor Ernie Sanders and Double X and Larry tomorrow night.
Yes. Now, folks, for those of you not knowing when you're going to be hearing this, the tomorrow night means the night of the 16th, Wednesday night, the 16th.
January 2019, you bet.
All right, Double X first. I want to talk for a few minutes here about the Attorney General confirmation hearings of William Barr. What do you think of him?
Well, unfortunately, Larry, I think what we're seeing perhaps is what I might refer to as nomination blindness in the Trump administration. We saw that Judge Kavanaugh turned out to be the wrong number for President Trump. It's unfortunate. He could have heard some cases that Justice Clarence Thomas complained about that would have put the abortion issue front and center back before the U.S. Supreme Court, and he specifically chose not to do so. Well, that's really not what the people elected President Trump to do, as we know. Similarly, with William Barr, and by the way, Judge Kavanaugh is through and through a Beltway creature and a Bush appointee from back in the day, and there's several data points there that lead us down that road on Judge Kavanaugh. Well, as you mentioned then, Larry, with Mr. Barr, there's several data points that lead us down to the road on Mr. Barr as well. He was the former Attorney General for H.W. Bush, that is George H.W. Bush, Poppy Bush, in his one-term presidency prior to being defeated by Bill Clinton in 1992. And William Barr was intimately involved with constructing all of the pardons that George H.W. Poppy Bush did on Christmas Eve of 1992 for as many as 6 of his administration officials who had been implicated in the Iran-Contra guns for drugs cocaine trade that was known as the Enterprise, that I'm sure, Larry, you were intimately familiar with as you interfaced with the Contras fighting against the Sandinistas there in Nicaragua back in the 80s.
Well, let me say very clearly, folks, I was not a part of the guns for drugs. I was a part of a group of individuals doing what I hope we don't have to do. Their country was taken over by communists, and when they woke up from this sleep, it was too late. Then they had to fight to get it back. Now, I'm going to say this about that, and then I'll drop that subject. Adolfo Calero told me, and he was the head of the directorate. The directorate was this group Ronald Reagan helped form of the leaders, top 10 leaders of Nicaraguan resistance. I asked Adolfo, I look around at these buildings in Managua and around, and they're just beautiful, but they're all covered with vines, and the stucco's falling off. What on earth happened? And he said, Larry, it was so subtle, and people didn't see it. We didn't, he said, including me, we didn't realize it until it was too late. Now, folks, that's a word of warning for us. That is a word of warning that I have not forgotten, that I lay for us. Now, about Barr, I knew him, worked with him on a couple of things when Bush was president. He would not have been my choice in any way, shape, or form. But Double X, here's the problem. President Trump, when it's time for him to pick a Supreme Court justice or his Attorney General, now, not before, but now, he has a team that he gets counsel from, committee, and they go through 100 names or so, and they come up with the top 5, top 4, top 7, whatever. Then they present those people to President Trump. And from that group, President Trump gets to pick the one he wants. Now, Double X, I believe this committee, as with a lot of things that Trump has had counsel on, I believe he's getting bad counsel. I think he got very bad counsel with Kavanaugh, and it may turn out, I hope I'm wrong, he may have gotten worse counsel with Barr. But that's the process, would you not agree?
I would, Larry, and ultimately that leads us down the Primrose Path here in a nation of some 320 million, where nominally any conservative, competent attorney walking the street might be better to serve as the chief law enforcement officer in the United States of America, as the Attorney General of the Department of Justice, than some of the Beltway folks that make a living there, peddling influence, seeking government pensions, seeking power and influence, seeking deals after office. All of that swamp stuff begins to bear on the nomination process, as you've described, Larry. And unfortunately, that kind of narrows the bottle, if you will, so that President Trump cannot get a good landscape view, if you will, a good field of regard about all the possibilities. Because I'll guarantee you there's patriotic, competent attorneys out there that would jump at the chance to reestablish justice in this country in short order.
Well, I want to say also that I second that, folks. I second that in a big way. The problem that we have with this swamp, and the reason we elected President Trump, was to get us out of it, to get people on the outside of the swamp. That's what he brought in originally, folks, until you get to seats like the Attorney General and such. But like Double X said, I would rather have an attorney, a nobody, just pick up a phone book and podunk collar America and pick a name. And I would rather have that attorney than Barr or any of 1,000 Bars. Because
right.
if we keep going back to let's say, to the swamp, to the deep state, if we keep going back there to get people, we're always going to get what we've always gotten. And that's what we've got with him, I fear. Now, I will say this in President Trump's defense to some degree. It's not uncommon in administrations as they wind down their first term that the job is so stressful. Many of the top jobs around the president is stress, 24 hours a day stress. And so they start to fall off after a couple of years. And usually the second term, you'll find most presidents moderate their staffing. So we may be seeing some of that. It may be that his counsel is telling him, maybe if we get an attorney like Barr, who is closely related to the swamp. Maybe he can help better maneuver us through it. But that's putting a whole lot of trust in a man that sat there today, Double X, and I'm paraphrasing, but he said he thinks very highly of Mueller. As a matter of fact, his wife and Mueller's wife go to church together every Sunday. They're buddies. I think he even said their kids play together or something. That troubles me. He also said, he answered Double X that Mueller's investigation was not a witch hunt. Now, I've got a problem with that statement, folks. The special counsel is to be given a crime, and his purview is limited to that crime. What Mueller has done is expanded his purview to cover Trump from the day he was born in any area of the man's life to date. That is not proper. Am I correct, Double X, as you interpret the Constitution and the constitutionality of it?
You bet. You bet, Larry.
And do you understand what I said? Mueller is supposed to be specific about one crime, not this broad base cover any and everything in Trump's life from the beginning of birth till now.
Right.
Barr should have known that.
And it's
Barr should have said something.
Well, I was just going to say, Larry, Mueller has come to the whole party with such previous baggage that it just seems to be inappropriate for that whole thing to continue. And the clear fraternal relationship, if you will, between William Barr and Robert Mueller just seems to be inappropriate to the time and the moment in the restoration of this republic. Make no mistake, folks, that justice is in tatters right now in the United States of America. Larry, you heard me talk earlier as we chatted today about what happens to even the least of us, even in Christian churches, where families are preyed upon by state agencies, children are preyed upon. We have rampant things happening in our country right now, and they need immediate redress. Well, if we're going to try to fix that problem by, retooling what has already gone before with the William Barrs of the world and the Robert Muellers of the world, I'm afraid that we're going to lose the thread. And it may be that we'll get to a tipping point where it just can't be recoverable. Now, bottom line is, Larry, we saw tens of thousands of folks at every single Trump rally, even to the present. Folks line up for hours, and some don't even get in. They'll line up for a quarter of a mile, a half a mile down the road, standing there to try to get in line to a Trump rally. The people are moving and speaking behind President Trump as they try to return to a limited constitutional republic under the God of the Bible. But they realize that there's a logjam there in the Beltway and in the swamp. And so if we don't start pushing some of these swamp creatures out of the way to get to justice, we're going to run out of clock time here, and it's already the fourth quarter.
Well, I fear we're at the fourth quarter. I fear we're with 6 seconds left on the clock. And we got one play left, and we're on the 1 yard line. That's how close I think we are to losing.
Right.
If we don't make that last play, it's over.
Right.
But now, talking about Barr leads us to the next subject of tonight's program, which is QAnon or QAnon or whatever the guy's name is, QAnon. Now, folks, it's not my style. It's not normal for me to talk about any other program, any other thing like that. I just don't do it. But this one has created a problem, a real problem. Thousands upon thousands of listeners are listening to QAnon. And I'm going to deal with one issue. There's probably a bunch, but we will deal with one tonight if it's okay with you, Double X. One of the major themes that seems that now I don't know this to be a fact, but I understand one of the major themes he pushes is that there's 60,000 some odd sealed indictments ready to be served, or maybe some have even been served. Now, folks, that's not true. Do you hear me? That's not true. I can tell you that when it comes to an indictment, most of you saw during the hearings of Nunes and Meadows and those guys, many times you heard them say when it came to requesting information or requesting copies of this, that, or the other, and they didn't get it and they were frustrated, they all said, look, we can issue a contempt of Congress, but we can't indict anybody. That's got to be done through justice. Now, what that would mean to me, this is to me, that 60,000 indictments, sealed indictments, would have had to come from Sessions. Anybody claiming that they were going to indict some of the highest level past presidents, high government officials that are supposedly in these indictments, I assure you folks, there can only be two places it can come from. Number one, it's got to come from a federal prosecutor who is the Justice Department. And so they've got to go to the federal prosecutor. The federal prosecutor's got to take it to the Justice Department, and something to that magnitude, I assure you, would have to be run through the Attorney General.
Yep.
Jeff Sessions did not issue 60,000 indictments. You got it? Didn't do it. I got that from him. He didn't do it. That was the time period when it supposedly originated, so it had to have been him to the greatest part or to a part of it. Now, the other way it could have occurred, would have been through the FBI. But again, the FBI could simply do the investigation, but they would have to turn it over to justice, to a federal prosecutor to be prosecuted. So, folks, I don't think that happened. I don't. I'm sorry. And what it's done, XX, it's got a lot of people sitting back. Instead of getting as active and as motivated as we need everyone to be, people are sitting back saying, well, it's being done. And they've got their hopes up. And what has happened to us throughout the years that I've been around doing this stuff, when people get their hopes up and get them up and get them up, and then it falls flat, eventually they get tired. They get tired and they don't want to do it anymore. They tried once and it didn't do anything, so they stopped. The other thing about Q, and this is where you come in, XX, they claim that they will be tried in military tribunals. Now, XX, is it possible for the crime of fraud, malfeasance, theft, money laundering, for any of those crimes, could they be prosecuted under military tribunals?
No, Larry, those would be under civil law. Basically, if we're looking for clarity on what can be done, we can actually, interestingly enough, go to that conversation that happened with Judge Kavanaugh during his confirmation hearing with Senator Graham, in which they discussed a couple of different bodies of law, the law of armed conflict and civil law. And Senator Graham, interestingly enough, was, I think, pointed in asking Judge Kavanaugh, who, give him credit, I mean, he's an expert and well-read in the law. He asked him the question of whether it's possible to try civilians under the law of armed conflict. Well, nominally the answer is yes to that question, and it has been done on a couple occasions, and people have actually received, severe penalty under federal statute, which is Title 18, Sections 2181 through 2184. That's treason, sedition.
But now, whoa. Title 18 also covers racketeering, right?
Yeah, I believe it does. RICO?
Yes.
Sure, yeah.
RICO Act's what Title 18 is known as.
Right. Now, the Uniform Code of Military Justice, as Larry well knows, is the body of law that's used under military tribunals, if you will. And Article 3, Section 3 of the U.S. Constitution defines just a couple things, including treason against the United States, which shall consist only in levying war against them or in adhering to their enemies, giving them aid and comfort. And no person shall be convicted of treason unless on the testimony of 2 witnesses to the same overt act or on confession in open court. Now, Congress under Title 18 has established the penalties for that, as we've discussed. And in the case of treason, the penalty can be up to and including death. By the way, folks, if you're interested in kind of reading more about that, you can go to eagleforumofcalifornia.org. That's eagleforumofcalifornia.org, and you will see listed there President Trump's anti-corruption executive orders, which includes a PDF file that takes you through the Section 2181 through 2184 to save you the trouble of trying to research all that yourself. And I think every American should look at that stuff, Larry, because we need to know what's at stake. Well, as you say, bottom line then, okay, so where are we then on trying to reestablish justice in this country? There is a website, Larry, that's a YouTube channel website. I believe it's called the SJR Report, and I don't know if you've participated with them.
No, I have not.
It's a remarkable effort. It appears to be a collaborative effort, and they're cataloging all of the indictments that have been put forward. And they're the ones who are, in part, keeping track of these numbers. They come up with some 57,000, I believe, the last time I checked, which was several weeks ago. Now, they're combing through all of the federal jurisdictions on a cooperative basis to see what indictments are being put forward. And there are websites that do that, and it escapes me right now.
Wait a minute. One thing. You said they're looking at 57,000 indictments. Are those current indictments that are sealed and pending, or is that past and present?
These are sealed pending indictments that have happened over at least the last 2 years in all of the federal jurisdictions around the country, at least as they're kind of cataloging these. And what they do is they'll go. There's a website, Larry, the name of which escapes me right now. You might have it on the top of your mind here. It's a federal website that allows you to go and see what federal jurisdiction you're dealing with and what cases are pending therein. It escapes me the name of it at the moment.
Well, folks,
that's one of the websites that they use. So there's a group of these people that are going through, and of those 57,000, maybe of those, there would be, several tens of thousands that would be for MS-13 gangs in a particular jurisdiction in California,
right,
Arizona, Texas, whatever. All the kind of little fish in the pond, if you will. And then,
but that's what I was going to say, Super X, Double X, just 1 second. One of the things I was going to say, this may be where the confusion lies when you take 57,000 rounded up to 60,000. But that 60,000, as Double X just told you, that's not all high-level presidents and past and tops of government at all levels. That's gang members. That's everything.
Right.
So remember that.
Right.
Go ahead. No, I'm sorry.
Now, the interesting data point in all of that, Larry, is, and I haven't specifically delved into just sample that, that cataloging that's been done. And I believe, again, it's on YouTube, folks, and you can check it out. You can search for sealed indictments and search for something called, I believe it's the SJR or SGR report. And they will do a periodic 15 to 20-minute briefing about this stuff. And I have not taken the time to go into that federal website and search by jurisdiction to verify their numbers. However, they seem to be rather sincere about it, and nominally, let's say, and it breaks down into by state and by district within the state, federal district within a state.
All right, now stop there a second.
And so you might have like Eastern Missouri or Western Missouri. You might have 130 sealed indictments in Eastern Missouri.
Yeah, double X.
Yeah.
Double X. Let me get you to hold a second. Now, folks, that coincides with, as I am told, QAnon put something up showing in states. There was this many in Texas, this many in Missouri, this many whatever. What he's telling you, if this is the number that he's actually looking at, those are indictments in those states. But here again, that is not high-level government leaders. It's not.
Right.
Now, could it be some? It could. But again, let me just say this. If there was an indictment, double X, sealed indictment for Barack Hussein Obama, if there was one, with the media even as controlled as it is today, knowing what we know about how Washington leaks things, right?
Yeah.
Do you believe that a sealed indictment made out to Barack Hussein Obama could be kept quiet?
It'd be a very difficult task, Larry.
Yeah. You see, folks, so...
Maybe not impossible.
You know, guys, I'm telling you, please, you cannot take these things and lay down thinking that every bad guy in Washington is sitting there with a sealed indictment coming at them. That's not the case. That's not true. What I worry about, double X, disinformation. What would be the purpose, double X, of QAnon or anyone, not just him, anyone? What would anyone have as an agenda? Now, folks, I've always said this, and you can go back and listen to me 30 years ago. When you're trying to measure up a politician, look at the agenda. If you can figure out what a politician or some high-ranking government person, if you can figure out their agenda, you'll know a whole lot about them and which way they're going to go. What could possibly be the agenda of a group that's putting out disinformation like that? What could be the agenda, double X?
Well, as we touched on before the broadcast, Larry, if you were trying to set the people up for a big disappointment, that would certainly be one way to do it.
Well, see, folks, that's where it breaks down. Tell me a positive agenda for doing that. Tell me one. It's not true. It's not true. Well, you say it's not true, but it is true. No, it's not true. Yes, there are 57,000 as of double X's time period. Indictments, both open and sealed. 57,000 both opened and sealed. What would be a good reason for putting that out and making it look like they're going to get every bad guy at the highest levels in Washington or anywhere else? Presidents, past presidents, governors, presidents' wives. What would be a good reason?
Well, I think obviously a good reason would be to give people hope that we're actually getting on top of the justice problem in our nation.
Mm-hmm. But that would be false hope, folks. False hope. If you're waiting for 60,000 people talking about past president, department heads of federal government at every level, if you're waiting for the day they are served with their sealed indictment, and if found guilty, they are going to be put in prison at Gitmo, you're wrong. It don't work that way. First off, folks, military tribunals. Military tribunals cannot, I repeat, cannot be used for civil criminal cases. If I'm lying, double X, tell me.
Well,
statement.
I would say one thing, Larry, and that has to do with the Executive Order 13823 from President Trump, which was on the 30th of January, about a year ago now. And what folks might be hanging their hat on there is in Section 2, it talks about the status of detention facilities at U.S. Naval Station Guantanamo Bay in Cuba. And Section 2, Clause B says, after describing that in Clause B, detention operations shall continue to be conducted, and the idea is that it would be treating for purposes of incarcerating those persons involved in terrorism. And Clause C says, in addition, the United States may transport additional detainees to U.S. Naval Station Guantanamo Bay when lawful and necessary to protect the nation. Now, the question becomes then, Larry, if you have a general insurrection happening in our country, or if you have a coup that is underway, perhaps to unseat President Trump and to continue through with the agenda that the people of the United States of America thwarted on November the 8th of 2016, as we've seen with what the Epic Times has called the insurance policy, and what the Peter Strzoks and the Lisa Pages of the world and the Bakers and McCabe's and on were involved with. If that looks like it can be considered to be sedition, well, conceivably, Larry, those folks could be taken to Gitmo and then prosecuted under military tribunal and the Uniform Code of Military Justice, because if they're being seditious, well, in a sense, constitutionally under Article 3, Section 3, they could be conceivably giving aid to our enemies. And who are our enemies today? Well, Communist China, I think, is clearly a player. Iran is clearly a player. And we saw in Benghazi really remarkable and seditious and treasonous acts that occurred there. And we had a broadcast with Pastor Sanders' show, Larry, on Thursday of last week, in which we treated that subject matter with Ken Timmerman, who wrote the book Dark Forces, and also a follow-on book called Deception, which showed that when Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama stood before the bereaved family members of the 4 Americans who were killed at Benghazi on September 11th and 12th of 2012 in Libya, that she and Barack Obama knew that the Iranian Secret Service had conducted that attack. And by the way, Larry, we're going to be talking about that again on Pastor's broadcast on Thursday of this week, with a man who had gone some months before Benghazi and had been invited as a contractor to participate in that, but decided it would be better not to do so because he knew that orders had come down from Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama that no U.S. service uniformed member would be allowed in Libya to support the consulate at Benghazi or the consulate in Tripoli. And so he deemed it judicious not to participate, and we'll speak with him on Thursday night. But the point is...
let me say... go ahead.
I was just going to say, the point is, the serious problem there is that, yeah, it sounds very much like Treason with a capital T was involved there, and folks can go to kentimmerman.com to see more about that.
Well, the bottom line to what all XX was telling you is treason. Now, if you can connect an otherwise civil crime in such a manner that it does constitute treason, it's possible. But let's take the 2 most famous husband and wife team that committed treason. What was their name, XX? Rosenberg's. Famous case. Where were they tried? In
they were tried in
military tribunal or civil court?
Civil context, yep.
Yep. Folks, it would be a stretch. It would be a stretch. You might be able to get 2. You might be able to get 5. Maybe 10 various past, present, high-level mucky-mucks in government. That you could stretch and connect to treason to the degree that it would fall under a military tribunal. But 60,000? You're not going to try MS-13 in a military tribunal. You're just not. Now, they are enemies to this country, no doubt.
Yeah.
But there has been no declaration declaring them enemies of the United States of America as in war.
Right.
And so on and so on. So, folks, I'm telling you, it's misleading if that's what you think is going to save this country. It's not. I don't want to be the one telling you this, but I got to. It's not. The day that 60,000 cases would be heard dealing with civil matters and military tribunal comes under one condition and one condition only, and that's the declaration of martial law. Would you agree?
Right. Yeah, and that's where President Trump's executive orders kind of get into that, and in them, and folks, you can go to and see those executive orders at the White House, by the way, or I should say the White House website. You can also see them, as I say, at eagleforumofcalifornia.org, and they're conveniently kind of placed there for you. In those executive orders, President Trump actually does declare that a state of emergency exists in these matters. And so that's a significance which folks can kind of take for, maybe for a little bit of further research on their part to kind of satisfy themselves of where we are in this country. And by the way, folks, if you don't really think that it's a state of emergency in this country, consider all the election fraud that happened in Orange County this last cycle in the midterm election. We had several Republican representatives for Congress and for state office on election night on November the 6th, Tuesday of last year, who were projected to be winners in their races. And then suddenly there was vote mining that happened. And suddenly weeks later, their Democrat opponents proved to be victorious and ended up flipping all of Orange County in California, a traditionally, that is to say in Southern California, a traditionally conservative bastion, if you will, completely blue. And so if we don't think that our country's on an emergency footing here in terms of the functions of the republic, fair elections, justice in this country, limited government, with the taxation that we have to deal with this whole kind of ongoing taxation, and luckily we got from President Trump a break on that with the tax break, really this country would be, just think about, well, that's a long story, Larry. We may not have time for that this evening.
But the bottom line to tonight, Double X, is this. I don't want people believing, please don't believe, that you can sit back and just wait and that this 60,000 sealed indictments is going to rattle the cage and save the world. It's not going to do it. Number one. Number two, it was supposed to have already happened. Of course, it didn't. So they tell you some reason because of the death of H.W. Bush. That put it off. Well, it won't happen at the next date. There'll be another excuse. Folks, don't take social media as the gospel in all cases. Don't. Double X has heard me for how many years on Pastor Sanders? How many years have you heard me?
Many years, Larry, in fact, it was you who brought me to Pastor Sanders and his ministry.
Well, in all of those years, and all of the fantastic things I told you were fixing to happen, what percentage would you put on did happen the way I said it would? If you had to put a percentage.
I would
right.
say
80% of the time?
Yeah, I'd say 80% is a good number, Larry.
Yeah. So you see, even me, I said 80% too, even me, because some things just don't turn out the way they were supposed to. Even when you're told in advance they're going to happen, things come up that even presidents don't know. Like they may think they're going to do this move on such and such date, and then all of a sudden something happens and some congressmen flip-flop and it don't get done. Nobody's 100%. But you'll notice, Double X, since you have heard me, I always say there's three categories. And I tell you something, I will say that's my opinion. I make it very clear it's my opinion, and then when I say that, folks, my opinion, your opinion, everybody's got an opinion. If I quote an article, just as you've heard Double X do here tonight, when he quotes something or when he's referencing something, he tells you where it is. You know, go look for yourself. When I take something from some media source, you know, hey, I declare it. You can find that in the Washington Times story, whatever. And then the third category is when I say something that I can prove in a court of law. Prove it in a court of law. And if you're me, and if you've said the things, Double X, that I have said about the Clintons, any day, if I was wrong, if I was lying, Double X, how long would it take them when they were the president and first lady? How long would it have taken them to get me thrown in jail for slander, libel, criminal slander and libel?
Well, I got to say, Larry, it doesn't take very long when you're kind of running the show, and the evidence of that was a poor Egyptian Coptic guy in Los Angeles named Nakula Nakula, and he was the guy that Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama decided they were going to...
That made the movie.
Yeah.
Right? He was the guy that made the movie.
He made this, kind of low-budget internet movie that was actually factually correct, but it was called The Innocence of Muslims, and it was found to be objectionable by Muslims because it told the truth about Islam. And so Hillary and Barack said, well, gee, we can use this as a way to deflect attention from the treasonous behavior that we were engaged with the Iranians and with others.
Put him in jail.
Say again?
They put him in jail.
Yeah, they threw him right in jail for 13 months, Larry, solitary confinement, no charges ever brought. Then when they brought him out of jail, I know the pastor who took him in at his church in Los Angeles and kept him there for a year in kind of a halfway circumstance, if you will, because once the wheels of justice start turning on you folks, even if you're fully innocent, the folks in those law enforcement agencies, they just have to do what they're told.
Right.
And that's how it works when you lose control of your government, you know.
And folks, I'm telling you, it can happen. So that's why I ask you to value what I say under those three categories. But remember, they could have thrown me in jail any time had I misstated one thing. One thing they could have thrown me in. Now, the other thing they could have done, which they did not do, they could have made stuff up like Kavanaugh with that woman. They could have made some outlandish thing completely up against me. But I had one thing over them that kept them from doing that. If they had prosecuted me, I would get discovery. They didn't want me having discovery because I knew where the bodies are buried.
Right.
They didn't want me testifying in a court of law under oath because I could have told the whole story right there to God and everybody. They didn't want that to come out. So they only had two options. Try to keep me down, financially stressed, keep me out of work, keep me with nothing, or kill me. The only two options they've had with me.
Right.
And it's worked. It has worked.
Well, I would say it hasn't entirely, it hasn't worked entirely, Larry. I think Bill Clinton was the first president to be impeached. Well, no, maybe the second president to be impeached,
second.
Right?
Yep, second. And there are those people that think I had something to do with it.
Yeah. And certainly you brought to the fore all of the, or many of the skeletons in the Clinton closet, going right back to Arkansas and the whole thing. And of course, anybody who's been following Larry Nichols is certainly familiar with the seminal movie, the documentary that you and Pat Mastriciano accomplished with Jeremiah Films, which is called the Clinton Chronicles. And folks, if you haven't had a chance to watch that, you really need to understand where the Clintons came from. And Larry pretty much tells it like it is there in about 90 minutes or thereabouts?
Yeah, thereabout. But folks, I'm just telling you, these things we're saying are true. There's one other thing that I'd like to say. Now, in deference to my guest, Double X, where there is an issue of personal safety, I use my name. I don't think there's ever been a day where I don't tell you my name. In my case, I tell where I live, the whole 9 yards. Maybe that's not the smartest thing anybody's ever done, but I do it. When people go by trucking handles on the internet, find out the reason. Double X has a reason, solid reason. There's Q. You see, because what if he's totally discredited? What would keep him if he were totally discredited from coming out tomorrow, doing something else and using another truck driving handle?
Yeah.
Yep. Now, if I mislead you and get you down a path and it turns out to have been a lie, I won't show my face again, or at least nobody would listen to me, right? That's the difference. So when you see these people doing these games on the internet, please remember, y'all, the social media is a wonderful thing. I'm not going to say it's not. But it also provides disinformation people an awful lot of space to confuse folks. It really does.
Well, that's true, Larry. And I think I would, for folks who are kind of becoming awakened, if you will, in the whole political discussion in our country, and there's plenty that need to be awakened and are coming alive. You and I have talked before, Larry, and we've talked about it with Pastor Sanders on the radio, that literally for 5 or 6 decades, our country was lulled into a box mentally. It's a Democrat, Republican, conservative, liberal, left-right box. And we let the truth get away from us in that, because we thought that all we have to do is, adhere ourselves to a particular side of the question, and the issue was decided. But the reality is that there were other things moving under those currents all the time. And you'll recall, Larry, that maybe 2-3 Thursdays ago now on Pastor's broadcast, when we had Steve Klein and you on, Steve, a former U.S. Marine Corps officer, as part of the Combined Action Program in Vietnam, where they actually lived in the villages and fought the communists, the Viet Cong, and the North Vietnamese regulars from the villages with the popular forces of the Free Vietnamese for months at a time outside the wire. Well, when we had you and Steve talking about some of the themes that are besetting our country, one of the things that we touched on, and that you had affirmed then, Larry, was that literally from the 1960s and the 70s on through the 80s and the 90s and now to the present, our country has been beset by an ongoing narco trade that elements of the deep state, if you will, have been involved in for their purposes, not the least of which is self-enrichment. And these forces become almost paramount in the swamp as everybody maneuvers up to the trough to get their bit of the pie. Most recent example of this, Larry, is, in the 60s and 70s, we had the opium trade out of the Golden Triangle that came through the French, the Corsican mob into New York and East Coast cities. Then, of course, we had the guns for drugs thing with the Iran-Contra stuff, which, as we talked about the other night, was the Bushes and the Stevens brothers and the Clintons and others involved with trading guns for drugs, and then the CIA using that for their purposes, but also for self-enrichment. And now we've got the poppy opioid crisis in our country, and guess what? Just happens to have been George W. Bush Jr. who was presiding over our entry into Afghanistan, where the poppies grow. So there's literally hundreds of billions of dollars of narco trafficking coming across that southern border, and these people who are in charge in the Beltway and in the swamp, they don't want to shut that down. Barack Obama...
Well, remember we talked also, if you remember, Double X, about human trafficking. If you built a wall, it would end human trafficking.
That's right. Yeah.
I mean,
so all these little girls that are being snatched off the street in Southern California and up and down the I-5 corridor in Oregon and Seattle and Washington and then, shipped on down to Ensenada and Baja and Tijuana and being used up in, just crazy, crazy stuff that's going on all around our country, all that would be ended because it's a whole lot tougher through a solid wall to get people across that. And so that's why that wall is truly the icon of our age, Larry. It separates good and evil. It separates a Republican form of government from the chaos of socialism and Marxism. It separates law and order from all of the Islamic narco trafficking and the human trafficking, as you say. And I was going to say, in terms of the Islamic narco trafficking, Newsweek reported on the 18th of last month that during the Barack Obama administration years, Hezbollah, which is the Islamic resistance in Palestine and who have suicide bombed thousands of people in the Middle East, including many hundreds killed and wounded, and thousands wounded, the Hezbollah was able to get 250 tons of cocaine through Venezuela up into our nation across that southern border. Well, folks, 250 tons of cocaine valued at $150 an uncut gram has a street value of $34 billion. So think about this for a minute. Let's decode that. You've got Islamicists who are...
We got 3 minutes, so we got to hurry.
Oh, you bet. Okay, well, basically, you've got Islamicists selling cocaine to Westerners so they can deconstruct Western society.
You got it. Folks, the whole point of tonight is to tell you to watch out. Watch out and don't become complacent. Guys like Double X, they've got vast knowledge. And just pay attention. We're supposed to have discernment, right? Double X, isn't that something we're supposed to have, discernment?
You bet.
Now, I relate that to common sense. We've got to have common sense. And when somebody's telling you they're going to use military tribunals, it ain't going to happen. It ain't going to happen unless we're in a situation where we are under martial law. And at that point, folks, it don't matter. We've already lost. If we go to that, we've lost our country. And the whole thing I'm trying to do, Double X is trying to do, Pastor Sanders and a host of others, Jason Goodman and others, what we're trying to do is save it. Save it. Don't lose it and try to get it back. That ain't easy.
That's right. Rather use ballots than bullets.
That's right. So, folks, with that, I'm going to say good night. But listen to this program. Pass it around. And then the other thing, folks, I've got to have your help. I've got to have your help. So tonight, if you can, or today, whenever you hear this, please go to nicholslive@aol.com on PayPal. nicholslive@aol.com. Fast, please. Or you can go to nicholslive.com, and there you can see other methods that you can push a button and get money here. But we need your help desperately. So with that, Double X, thank you, my friend. See you tomorrow night on the 16th on the Pastor Ernie Sanders program, What's Right, What's Left. And folks, I'm telling you, Pastor Sanders is my go-to guy for my faith. He is.
You bet.
I can
Well, thank
I
you,
can
Larry.
tell you he lives the scriptures that he tells about. He doesn't just talk.
Amen, brother.
Double X, see you tomorrow night, folks.
See you tomorrow,
That's
Larry.
it.
Thank you, folks, and
You bet.
God bless you, Larry, and your Nichols Army.
Thank you, sir. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye,
All right.
y'all.
Good night.